Again, a warm welcome on another darn-like spring Sunday morning. We're reminded, as I've mentioned today, the importance in our readings today, the importance of healing and what it is to be of service. And we've been talking in this ordinary time around the importance of discipleship. There was a whole lot of activity going on in today's gospel with Jesus. In this period of ordinary time, we continue to be reminded of the extraordinary events in the earthly life of Jesus in the most ordinary way of his life. Today in the gospel, we heard a lot going on. He was in synagogue, and then he left there and went to Simon's house, brought in. Other disciples were there. They told him about Simon's mother-in-law. He reaches out, takes a hold of her hand. She's healed, she's up, she's helping serve the household. He takes off on his own to a deserted place. They need to find him. They find him. What the heck are you doing here? And he decides, come with me, let's go off to the neighboring village. All that in literally like 3 paragraphs. So he had a rather extraordinary life in today's gospel. As has been mentioned, it is time. This time, particularly of ordinary time, has provided us a bit of an interlude between the major liturgical seasons. I remind you again, Lent begins in 10 days. As we again begin our Lenten journey on Ash Wednesday, which just happens to also be Valentine's Day. Most appropriate. In anticipation of Lent, now is a time to pay closer attention to what it actually means to be a disciple, if you will, to be of service in our modern world, as well as our larger church. As human beings, we generally have a need to know what the cost is going to be of most everything. And we certainly are aware, and we've heard and read books about the cost of discipleship. It's important for us to think about how much time in our life we want to quibble about the cost of discipleship, as opposed to simply thinking about, more directly, how are we to be of service to one another? What does it actually mean to be a healing presence to others in our life? What needs to happen within our own lives before we can be confident in order to say yes to a life of service? As we heard in today's gospel, when Jesus heals, he does not simply restore people to a former state of well-being. Rather, physical healings are outer signs of a much deeper transformation of body, of mind, as well as spirit. In a phrase, with Jesus' healing, nothing, quite frankly, is ever the same again. When Jesus enters the home of Simon, they immediately tell Jesus about Simon's mother-in-law, who is ill and has a fever. Jesus approaches her, takes a hold of her hand, holds her hand, and helps her up. When the fever is healed, the woman experiences, if you will, a resurrection experience. She is lifted up in the same verbiage that the Gospels use when referring to the resurrection of Jesus. The woman has been given a new life, but not only for herself. As with the disciples, it is, again, she is a transformed life, and she is called to be of service to those around her. As we heard briefly, she then waited on them. This story reminds me of the many, many years, many experiences that I had working in hospice care, over a 35-year career of that. Many of those years overlapped my time here. I remember hearing a number. I would encourage people to train to be hospice volunteers. And from this parish alone, over 350 people did train to be hospice volunteers over numbers of years. One of the memories I have was of an elderly woman, perhaps much like the one we heard in today's gospel, who had come into our hospice program, lived way out in the eastern suburbs. And the family said, well, be prepared because she actually doesn't want to see anybody on the hospice team. Not the nurse, not the social worker, and certainly not the chaplain. Well, the nurse managed to get in initially once a month. The social worker, I think she simply just showed up and probably managed to get a little bit of time. The family said she definitely does not want the chaplain. The word that kept coming from the family in regards to her was she has lived alone most of her life, and in a word, she's really crabby. And she has always been known as crabby. And we have managed to care for her and be family as best we can, but we're just telling you, crabby. A couple weeks went by, and the family said, would you please, because the chaplain has called again to see if possibly he could come out. So it was agreed that perhaps she would be less crabby if we could just get that visit behind us. So she agreed to have me come out. And it was, thank you for coming, and there's the door, and really glad you came. I didn't find her particularly crabby. She didn't have a lot to say. But I assured her that I would be more than happy to come back at any time. About a week and a half later, she said to her family, you know what, I really don't know what that chaplain wanted, but he definitely made it clear he'd be more than happy to come anytime. She said, you know, why don't you just have him come back again? So I did, and that visit maybe lasted 15 minutes max. She said, well, time for you to go. You know, I do have some time next week. So I went back, and that visit was a couple of hours. And that visit had to do with unlocking what crabby was all about. And crabby was actually about brokenness, an immense amount of pain. And I assure you, this was under no sacramental experience in terms of reconciliation. She simply was sharing her story. So I want to be clear with you that I'm not sharing anything I heard today in the form of reconciliation. She was sharing her story with me. And I remember her taking a hold of my hand at one point in the visit. She began to talk about her experience and the isolation she had felt. And I said, can we go, how far back can we go? What do we need to talk about? And she was looking at the wall and not me, and then finally she would look at me. And she said, do you really want to know? I said, I think it's important. I said, in hospice, one is not going to be healed from whatever the illness is. But I said, there are many healings that can happen on the way to the end of one's life and the beginning of a new one. So she began to talk. She was in her mid-80s. And she began to talk as a young girl when she had been sexually abused by an older relative. It was a truth that she had never once shared in all of her 80-plus years. And that came right out as we began to talk. And there was a lightness that came over her once she saw that I had simply received her story. And there was obviously no judgment, but she felt that the big secret was now out. And it was for her in her dying weeks and months an amazing opportunity to let that go. And I talked about the importance of letting as much as she can in the time that she has to let the pain go. And as often as I come to see you as you would want, I want you to know that I will embrace as much of that pain as you want me to have, and I will take it with me out the door. That you need not be weighed down by it. She had me come frequently. And we stayed true to that arrangement. About a week and 2 weeks later, the family said, "We're not really certain what's gone on here, but we don't even know who she is. We don't know who this woman is, who experiences an incredible lightness, an incredible embrace of the life that she has now, as brief as that life is. For me, a lifelong memory of what it means, like the woman we heard in the gospel today, that experience of being able to feel loved, to be able to be held, to be able to share the big secret. To the extent that we fear and resist healing in our lives, I do believe that it holds us back truly from being our authentic selves. You cannot love another person, truly you can't, if you don't have a clue how to love yourself. You are not going to find that in loving another person. It simply doesn't work that way. So I encourage us today, as we think about healing and we think about the lack of healing and how it holds us back from being of service to one another, what we can do in our own lives to open ourselves to that. The lenses in which we see that in our lives is through the Paschal mystery, through the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. That is our moral compass. That is our roadway to healing ourselves. It is the way in which we can be of service to others. When we consider the life of Jesus, we saw it in a pinpoint way today. As he came into Simon's home, he took a hold of the woman's hand. That is a picture-perfect idea of who this Jesus was in this life. A person of compassion. The other lens is the death of Jesus. That is also for us a lens in which to see our life. To understand that this life we have is a gift. It comes around once. And we are encouraged in that death to also recognize the other deaths that need to occur along the way, of letting go of whatever that rock is that we all spend time rolling up the hill, assuming nobody can be of any help to us. So what it is to die to those things that keep us from moving forward in life. The life, the death, and the resurrection. The resurrection is indeed the lens in which we also see our life. To again recognize the resurrection of Jesus and how it affirms for us the divine truth that death does not have its final word for us. While it can be frightening to face the unknown, we do profess a belief in life everlasting. It is important for us in this life to remember that the one who brought us to the dance of life will most assuredly walk us home after the last dance on this earth. And that is something important for us to trust and to believe in. It is for us the resurrection. We're all familiar with our own choices to, at times, fall ill, to our own times of despair, our own times of indifference. Similar to the woman in today's gospel, We are all called and we are all worthy to claim healing that comes with faith in God, and also living a life in accord to the gospel, which is first, last, and always living a life of love. A part of our healing, and sometimes a way to be less crabby in life, is to recognize in our life those times that we need to stop shrinking in order to fit into a life that perhaps we no longer even fit in. So rather than look at what is too small in our life, where do we need to grow, instead we tend to want to shrink to fit a life that we simply no longer fit in. That's a way in which we can heal ourselves. I close with this reading from Donna Markova, an educator, an international authority, again, in creative change in our life. Before I read this, it will be the closing of the homily. I want you to just think in your own life. What are you shrinking from? What frightens you right now the most? What stone do you find yourself recently, through some of your life or through all of your life? What stone do you find yourself rolling up the hill over and over again without not much success? I want you to hear this reading and think about that in your own life. When you talk about healing, you're including the way that you live your life, whatever time that you have left. Sometimes it involves alleviating symptoms, but it always includes changing the conditions under which you are living. You don't heal from something that you're afraid of. You heal towards something that you deeply desire. Healing insists that you re-examine absolutely everything. All of your habits, your ideas, your beliefs, your values, your passions, your inhibitions, your assumptions, until you find those things that are truest to your core. And then you discard everything else. It demands that you nurture your questions until you discover how to create the kind of environment where you have integrity with yourself and the world around you. Joan of Arc, keep this in mind. I do believe that there is a wisdom hidden in every one of our greatest difficulties, in one of our greatest fears. There is a wisdom waiting for us in every one of our challenges and our difficulties. It can help us realize how much we actually matter to others, as well as what really matters to each of us individually. This is the essence of living a life that you can truly love others and you can love yourself. Let's think about that for a while. Amen.